I'm Vinnie Politan. The subject of my investigation, the death of Texas A&M student Brianna Aguilera. Police say it was suicide, but Brianna's mom does not believe it, and she's fighting back. Here's the story. 19-year-old Texas A&M student Brianna Aguilera was a rising scholar with a contagious smile, quick wit, and plans for law school. A young woman described by friends as fearless, focused, and unforgettable. But on a cold night in Austin, after a college football rivalry gathering, she was found dead beneath a 17-story student high-rise. Austin police say the evidence points to suicide, citing a deleted digital note and troubling messages to friends. Yet, Brianna's family, backed by high-powered attorney Tony Busby, rejects that conclusion, challenging the evidence, challenging the timeline, the balcony height, and whether or not police rushed to rule her death self-inflicted. One daughter, two versions of truth, a case suspended between grief and doubt, and tonight we step into the questions still echoing through the West Campus. Searching for answers a family refuses to let fade. It was quick. It was very quick when police in Austin came to that conclusion. Now, they're not saying it's their official ruling, but it's what they're telling mom, is that this is what, no foul play, this is what happened to your daughter, right? And then, and for the mom, you can understand, and for the family, you can understand, wait a second here. How do you know that? How do you, I mean, the body came falling 17 stories. How do you know how the body came falling 17 stories? They have a lot of questions and a lot of doubts. So we're going to dive into this story this hour to try to flush out some of the issues and where the discrepancies are in all of this. Let's bring in Court TV field reporter Cody Thomas. Cody, we do this often in a lot of cases, right? We start with the timeline leading up to Brianna Aguilera's death. So let's do that now. What do we know about the timeline and some of the facts surrounding these different events that night?
Well, yeah, Vinny, we do it just about every time we cover cases like this because it's important to note who Brianna was with, where she was, what she was doing throughout that day leading up to her tragic death. Take a listen to investigators breaking all of that down.
By approximately 10 a.m., we were able to access the camera's system inside the apartment complex, which shows us the hallway areas. It was found that Brianna had arrived at the apartment complex just after 11 p.m. on Friday, November 28th, and that she went into a specific apartment on the 17th floor. Video surveillance has confirmed that a large group of friends left that same apartment at 12:30 a.m. on November 29th, leaving just Brianna and 3 other girls in the apartment. Now on Saturday, November 29th, at approximately 12:54 p.m., I, along with patrol officers, made contact with the residents of that specific apartment that Brianna had been observed going into. The residents informed me that they were trying to report that their friend Brianna was missing. I was able later to confirm they had in fact placed a 911 call at 12:14 p.m. earlier that afternoon to report their friend Brianna was missing. They informed me that they were hosting friends for the Texas A&M football game and that Brianna was supposed to be staying there that preceding evening. I spoke with 3 different female witnesses on scene, as well as later a 4th witness who had left earlier that morning. The investigation showed that Brianna had been at a tailgate party earlier in the day and became intoxicated to a point that she was asked to leave the same tailgate. She had told her friends that she had lost her phone at some point near that tailgate. They had all returned to the apartment where Brianna borrowed a phone of a friend to call an out-of-town boyfriend. Witnesses heard Brianna arguing on the phone with her boyfriend, which was also confirmed later by the boyfriend. Phones from both the phone Brianna used and the boyfriend's phone have confirmed through call logs that call did occur. Now this call occurred at approximately 12:43 to 12:44 a.m., approximately 1 minute. This is 2 minutes before the 911 call of the body found down below on the pavement. Through this investigation, it was found that Brianna had attended the tailgate on Friday, November 28th at the Austin Rugby Club, arriving between 4 and 5 p.m. and then leaving at approximately 10 p.m. Witnesses stated that after Brianna was asked to leave the tailgate, she had repeatedly dropped her phone and staggered into a nearby wooded area where her phone and other items were later located by Austin police. A further review of Brianna's phone shows a deleted digital suicide note dated Tuesday, November 25th of this year, which was written to specific people in her life.
All right, Vinny, throughout that, we kept hearing about this tailgate, this tailgate that took place at Austin Rugby Club. Now, that location is 7.5 miles away from the apartment complex where Brianna was found. So it's not quite a quick walk away from the tailgate to the apartment. But what exactly happened during this tailgate? Now, Brianna's family's attorney, Tony Busby, down there in Texas, he opposes some of what investigators are saying. Take a listen to what he says happened at the tailgate and how it related to who showed up at the apartment later that night.
Tailgate at the Austin Rugby Club. There was an altercation between her and another female. No investigation of that. Turns out that other female was in the apartment with her that night. They failed to look into the anonymous message that was sent. There was an anonymous message that was posted that said, hey, I have specific information that this young lady was locked out on the balcony. Did you know that? It's not part of the investigation.
Now, Vinnie, Busby also points out what he sees as question marks in the investigation. Take a listen to this.
At first, we were told that she jumped from the balcony and the three young women that were in the apartment, and we're talking about, as I said, a tiny little apartment, were asleep and didn't know where she was. That's what we were told first. That they were asleep, they didn't even know she was on the balcony, they didn't know where she was, and that's the reason why they didn't call the police until 12:15 the next day. Well, she must have, she hung up her friend's phone and she just jumped. She hung up the phone, she dropped it on the balcony, she jumped. First question you should have is, where is the phone? What did she do with the phone? I asked the police that 3 different times. Austin Police Department did not find the phone on Miss Aguilera. Miss Aguilera returned the phone to its owner before she was seen going onto the balcony. Whoever phone she was using was standing right next to her as she went over the balcony, if she went over the balcony.
Now, Vinnie, Tony Busby does make a pretty good point there with how quickly after her friend's phone hangs up that 911 is called to attend to her body down there 17 floors below that apartment balcony. It's just real strange how quickly that happened, but let's just wait and see how this investigation unfolds. Now, Vinnie, we also have this video posted to TikTok by user Dada3Re. Now, he posted this video on TikTok saying he believes he heard screams just before Brianna died in that apartment complex that night. Take a listen.
When I was walking down Rio Grande and I heard those screams that I heard, it did something to my soul. It didn't feel right. It didn't feel like nobody having a good time. It didn't feel like nobody that was just like drunk or just getting in a fight screaming. The scream sounded like someone was forcing their way onto this girl.
Now, Vinnie, also important to note that same TikToker there said he reportedly heard somebody say, "Get off me," as well among those screams. And another thing, Vinnie, just important to reiterate here, the girls in the apartment where Brianna was before she allegedly jumped off the balcony, they did not call 911 to report her missing until 12:14 the following day.
That's such a big fact in all of this. Cody Thomas is going to stick with us all night. Thanks so much, Cody. So this timeline, right? You've got all these things happening all day, and then you get to the apartment. Those last moments, so important, and that brings us to the first question in our investigation. We've got opposing positions here on what's happening in those final moments. What really happened in the final moments of Brianna Aguilera's life? That's what this whole investigation is about, right? That's what the family's concerned about, and that's what investigators should be concerned about too, which is what happens in those final moments before she somehow, some way, apparently goes over the rails and ends up 17 floors below. Joining me to help us figure all this out, host of The Pascal Show. It is Pascal. Also with us, journalist, host of Something's Off on YouTube, Rebecca Lavoie. Great to have you both here. Thank you for joining us. Pascal, I'll start with you. To me, there's not complete clarity from my perspective. I know investigators doing their stuff. We don't know everything that the young women in the apartment said or what they saw, but there seems to be some loose ends here. What are your thoughts about what's really happening here in the final moments of Brianna's life?
Well, this is just a very, very strange timeline. And I mean, I think Tony Busby is asking a lot of really, really good questions. But the thing I'm still wondering is she loses her phone, right? She gets really, really drunk. She loses her phone. She goes up to this place with her friends. Let's just put her friends in quotations here. She borrows a friend's phone. And then apparently there was like a heated exchange that she had with a boyfriend, and then she gave the phone back to the friend, right? Then she goes out to the balcony. At least that's what some reports are saying here, right? So instantly I'm wondering, why didn't anybody ask if she was okay, go out to the balcony to check on her to see if she was all right? It just seems a little bit strange, right? But then on top of that, it's the main question of, who are these friends? Were they really close? Is this a Mean Girls type of situation here? There's so many questions here that haven't been answered yet, which is very, very strange. And then I keep wondering, were these friends really to be trusted 110% here or not?
Rebecca, your thoughts about these final moments and the way this young life ends. And I understand where the family's coming from. Like, I want all questions answered. I want a full investigation. Things seem to be moving pretty quickly with police. And it really, I think, comes down to those final moments where there's 4 young women in this apartment.
The circumstances and the timeline are certainly what brings me a lot of questions. I mean, this evokes for me the Sandra Birchmore case from 2021 in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, the Ellen Greenberg case, which is still a big subject of conversation in Pennsylvania back from 2020, I think that's 2012. I don't think investigators are necessarily fluid in the language of young people. I'm the mother of Zoomers. I understand that young people use the words associated with psychology these days. They talk a lot about mental health. They have conversations about self-harm. They have conversations about self-care. They use these therapeutic psychological terms in their discourse. I think that something on her phone that mentions suicide should not be evidence of her suicide, especially given everything else that we've seen here. It really is concerning, and I understand why the family doesn't trust the investigators here. And that really says something, that the investigators haven't done more to engender the trust of this family whose daughter has died.
And the other part of the timeline, Pascal, is that they came, according to the mom, they came to the conclusion of suicide before they even had her phone. That, to me, that's a real problem, because now you get the phone, you're looking to confirm your beliefs rather than just eyes wide open.
I think this is lazy due diligence and lazy investigation on their part. Their responsibility is to do everything they can, make sure every stone has been unturned or has been turned over, to make sure that they have the final diagnosis, the final proof that she really did do this unthinkable thing to herself, that she did commit suicide. I think this is ridiculous, and I totally understand why the family is doing everything they can to get as close as they can to the truth as possible here.
Yeah, they have to. Okay, big thanks, Pascal, Rebecca Lavoie. Great to see you. Great to have you on. Coming up next, what does the phone evidence prove?
At no time did any evidence point to this being anything of a criminal nature.
the disappearance of mother Anna Walsh.
Her husband now charged with her murder.
All eyes on this accused killer.
Mr. Walsh was suspecting his wife of having an affair.
The massive trail of evidence.
This incredible timeline of Google searches.
It shows everything that was in his mind.
He searched how long before a body starts to smell.
The disappearance of Anna Walsh murder trial. Live coverage weekday mornings, 8, 7 Central on Court TV.
Brianna was a driven, disciplined, and caring person. She was beautiful. She was a loving daughter, a protective big sister, and a caring granddaughter. A second mom to her 2 younger brothers. Her baby was her little Yorkie, Ava. All of us were her best friend. She made everyone around her feel loved and supported.
That's Brianna's mom, Stephanie Aguilera. You know, I'm thinking about everything that family is going through. You know, it's the heartbreak, it's the loss, but now they've got a little bit of a mission. So maybe that helps a little bit. Hopefully it does. Let's get back to the evidence. Let's bring in Court TV field reporter Cody Thomas. Cody, seems like a really big piece of evidence in this case is going to be Brianna's phone. You know, almost every case we talk about here, the phone has so much information, but here on many different levels.
Yeah, Vinny, the phone is monumental to this case, a huge, important puzzle piece to kind of clue all this stuff together. And it wasn't found until the next day after Brianna allegedly jumped from the balcony. It wasn't found until November 29th, Vinny. And Brianna's mother, Stephanie Rodriguez, she called police that afternoon concerned about Brianna's location because she had been trying to ping Brianna. She hadn't heard from her, and, you know, apparently they talk all the time, so this was a weird thing for her not to be replying to her mother. She then called back to police, telling police that the phone was in an odd location according to her tracking app. Take a listen to this.
On Saturday, November 29th, it was found that Brianna's mother, Stephanie Rodriguez, had called the Austin Police Department at 12:50 p.m. This was in an attempt to locate Brianna. Rodriguez called back an hour later at 2 p.m. stating the location of her daughter's missing phone. The phone was located by Austin police officers in a wooded area by 3:30 p.m. that afternoon near Walnut Creek in a field by the Austin Rugby Club.
And Vinny, again, that Austin Rugby Club, that is where the tailgate was held. But the important question here, what exactly was on the phone? Now, investigators have gone on record saying a deleted suicide note was found on it, dated November 25th of 2025, which is just 3 days before her death. Now, police say it was written to specific people in her life, but the family's attorney, Tony Busby, disputes this, saying that Brianna had a creative writing class the previous semester. Investigators also say on the phone that Aguilera had more suicidal comments to her friends back in October, so a month before her death, and this continued through the evening of her death with self-harming actions. And they say on the phone was a text to another friend indicating thoughts of suicide. Now, of course, Brianna's mother says her daughter was not suicidal, and in an interview with local station KSAT, she went on record and said, quote, "There was a fight that happened between my daughter and another girl, and they were all staying in the same apartment that I have actual text messages of, and the detective just disregarded them." So, Vinny, if what the investigators are saying is true about what is found on this phone, it does support their theory that Brianna jumped from the balcony, but of course her family and her family's attorney are disputing every single bit of this, saying Brianna was not suicidal whatsoever.
Yeah, and saying that there was a conflict with someone in the apartment, right? An actual, seems like a physical conflict. Okay, let's get to the next question in our investigation, and it's a big part of the investigation. What does the phone evidence prove? Joining me, host of the 13th Juror podcast and Crime Junkie Jury, Brandy Churchwell is with us, and private investigator Lauren Vellucci. All right, Lauren, what are your thoughts about the phone? What does the phone evidence prove?
I have a lot of thoughts about the phone. I went back and methodically listened to this press conference, and if you keep going in the clip that you just showed, I will quote what he says. He says, "The police placed her phone back on the 17th floor with the rest of her belongings for the family to retrieve." I'm sorry, what? He didn't care enough, those police didn't care enough to look into her phone when they got it, when the mom told him where it was located? Who had access to that phone? Did the people in the apartment that she was with have access to that phone until the parents picked it up? I have so many questions, but this is disgusting that they would do this. I don't know how they think that they're going to solve any kind of cases there if they don't actually do an investigation. And I am livid about this one, Vinny.
Brandy, what are your thoughts? What does the phone evidence prove here?
I mean, right now, the phone evidence doesn't prove very much. And I think that's important to emphasize. I mean, it's still early on, right? We don't have the full investigative picture or the technical reports behind what the police are describing. But what we do have are two very different interpretations of the same pieces of digital evidence. And I agree. I mean, not having the full investigation, not having every stone turned when it comes to something like this is such a huge misstep, and it's such a huge mistake. I think that, you know, you mentioned earlier, digital footprints and phones, that's a lot of where, you know, a lot of information and a lot of questions can be answered with that. And without having the process of going through that, you know, looking at every single piece of every single information that they can get from that, it leaves a lot of questions unanswered. So I think, you know, especially with the suicide note, the alleged suicide note, they're saying Busby's saying that that's not his interpretation of it, that it was an essay or creative writing. So right now, the phone doesn't prove much of anything. And I think that that's going to be an issue until we can hear more about it.
Yeah, Lauren, it seems, and I think this is part of your frustration, that there is many times we have criminal defense attorneys in courtrooms say these words, rush to judgment. And it seems like there is a very quick judgment here. And I thought about that. I'm like, well, why? Well, part of this story, and I understand that it's, you know, a college football rivalry, but think of the alternative, that if you are investigating Texas Longhorn students for the murder of a Texas Aggie student who was in town for the big game. That's a bad look. That's a real bad look. Now, I'm not saying that they're sweeping it under the rug, but in the back of my mind, I'm wondering, could there be any reason for a rush to judgment to say to mom and dad, hey, I'm sorry, but your daughter took her own life?
Yeah, that's exactly right. And this isn't the first time that we've seen college towns do such a thing. You know what looks worse than a possible murder? The police of the local college town not doing an actual investigation to see if it was murder or not. This is not how we do things. Everything is looked as suspect until your investigation leads and shows you otherwise. They didn't do anything. The fact that the defense attorney is having to come out and say, hey, we have someone who heard something that was suspicious that night, is ridiculous. They should have immediately went and talked to anyone in the vicinity of their apartment who could have heard something. It's literally any kind of investigation 101. You want those people who are in earsight and eyesight of what possibly happened. They didn't do anything. I don't know what, till right now, that they've done. What have they done? I don't know.
Yeah, and Brandy, you know, part of what you're getting out of the phone is not just her own writings but her communications with others, including her mom. And her mom said they weren't interested in those communications.
Yeah, which is wild to me, you know, and I understand in cases like this, it is common for families to struggle with the idea of suicide, and grief can create a need for answers. But when you have this huge piece of digital information that can provide some of those answers and they're not taking it, that's a problem. That's a big red flag. And I think that as a mother, I can't imagine being able to just accept that and just say, okay, well, you know what? Y'all told me that this is the answer, and I know you didn't really do any investigating, but I'm just going to accept it. So I 100% understand why they're questioning things, why they're upset, and why they need those answers. And the fact that it wasn't offered to them or even attempted, I understand where they're coming from.
All right, our guests are going to stick around. Still to come, does the evidence suggest Brianna Aguilera was suicidal? I'm Vinnie Politan. We continue our investigation of the death of Texas A&M student Brianna Aguilera. She fell from 17 stories, but was it suicide or something else? Here's the story. Her name was Brianna Aguilera, honor roll student, future law applicant, daughter, and friend. Thanksgiving weekend should have been filled with joy and football spirit, but instead it ended beneath the shadows of a towering Austin apartment. Police say Brianna climbed over that balcony rail herself, having written a deleted November 25th message they interpret as a suicide note. But attorney Tony Busby and Brianna's mother tell a different story, claiming she feared heights, that no furniture stood near the rail, that witness accounts of commotion were never fully investigated. They argue this was not despair, but a case closed too quickly, evidence questioned too lightly. Two narratives, one unanswered night, and a nation watching a grieving mother demanding more than a suicide ruling. She wants the truth, no matter where it leads. And the truth, what is the truth here? And I think to understand what could have happened to Brianna taking her own life, you have to understand her life. Let's bring back Court TV field reporter Cody Thomas. What was going on in Brianna's life?
Vinnie, of course, she was a Texas A&M student, and according to her mother, she was a stellar student, looking forward to taking the LSATs, going on to try to become a lawyer, going through law school, and likely becoming someone we would love to have on the show down the line in the future. Vinnie, no sign of taking her own life whatsoever. Take a listen to the family attorney, Tony Busby, breaking all of this down.
We refuse to believe that this young woman committed suicide. Why? Because she was not suicidal. Contrary to what has been sloppily reported, in many cases by a lot of the people here, she did not engage in self-harm. She had never tried to hurt herself before. So why are these groups of lawyers engaged in this? Because this family wants the truth. The detective from the Austin Police Department, he claimed she made suicidal comments. He told us in the Zoom call she made suicidal comments. You know what he was talking about? The other day, when I was talking to a friend the other day, I said, man, you're going to make me jump off a bridge. That's what he's talking about. Silliness like that. He later claimed she was making those kinds of statements on the day or the night that she died. If that's the case, why did her friends leave her out on the balcony by herself? The detective was talking about suicide before he was ever given her phone. Then he gets into her phone and he sees an essay that she wrote and he calls it a suicide note. She took creative writing the semester before. I don't know what this purpose of that. We'll never know what the purpose of what she wrote and deleted. But this is the suggestion was that she left a quote suicide note. Total malarkey. Tailgate at the Austin Rugby Club. There was an altercation between her and another female. No investigation of that. Turns out that other female was in the apartment with her that night.
Now, Vinnie, Brianna's mother, Stephanie Rodriguez, also spoke following Tony Busby reiterating that same sentiment. Take a listen to this.
My daughter was not suicidal. I know my daughter better than anyone. We spoke every day. I spoke to her on the 25th, the 26th, and the 27th. Even the morning of the 28th. She was not suicidal.
Vinnie, her mother also took to Facebook and made a post here saying, quote, "This was not accidental. Someone killed my Bree and gave all the group of friends a lot of time to come up with the same story. How was it that certain friends left immediately and the person who was living at the apartment complex vacated her apartment ASAP?" But Vinnie, regardless of all this, regardless of what her mother thinks and what Tony Busby thinks, investigators are still sticking by their evidence. Take a listen.
A further review of Brianna's phone shows a deleted digital suicide note dated Tuesday, November 25th of this year, which was written to specific people in her life. From the moment this call originated up until now, between all of the witness statements, all of the video evidence, and all of the digital evidence collected, at no time did any evidence point to this being anything of a criminal nature. Rather, our investigation has revealed that unfortunately Brianna had made suicidal comments previously to friends back in October of this year. This continued through the evening of her death with some self-harming actions earlier in the evening and a text message to another friend indicating the thought of suicide.
Now, Vinny, we did a little research here today just to kind of contextualize this sort of thing. We learned that jumping from a high height is actually not a common method of attempted suicide for women specifically, according to multiple different studies. Those studies also show that jumping and other forms of violent methods like using a gun, for instance, are far more common for men. Women often choose other means like poisoning or cutting themselves.
All right. Cody Thomas, thanks so much. Let's think about all that evidence, and it brings us to the next question here. Does the evidence suggest Brianna Aguilera was suicidal? Everything that's going on in her life and some of these allegations about notes and deletions and no prior self-harm. What does it all mean? Still with us, podcast host Brandy Churchwell, and joining us, licensed clinical psychologist Dr. Jamie Zuckerman. All right, Dr. Zuckerman, let me ask you, there's a lot here on the plate that we sort of learned. What are your thoughts about the evidence? Does it suggest that she was or could have been suicidal? If she had written some sort of note but deleted it, she spoke to her mom that day. There was nothing going on. She was drinking a lot that day. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, so unfortunately, when somebody is suicidal, the people that would stop them from harming themselves are often the people that don't know. We hear this a lot. Somebody takes their own life and their family is just absolutely shocked and surprised. Let's say there was a history of depression, but a lot of parents will say, I had no idea, because people that are suicidal they suffer in silence, many of them. And while, yes, jumping from a height is not common for females, it's a very lethal method. Usually people that do jump are committed to doing this, and it's also a public statement. Somebody is going to find you. So there's that aspect, which is less likely for women, yes. The suicide note, it is also common for people to write a note, delete it. They're very hesitant. They haven't decided. They're not sure. But what I will say is when somebody is committed to harming themselves, they're not going to tell people. They're just going to keep it to themselves.
Brandy, your thoughts about some of this evidence, and there is some level of conflict where it seems police are saying there was evidence of self-harm that day. The mom saying there's no prior self-harm. What are your thoughts about what was going on that day, and whether or not you think the evidence suggests that, hey, there are some things here that look like she very well could have been suicidal?
Without full context, it's so hard to say, because right now what we're dealing with is not the evidence itself, but the interpretations of the evidence coming from two different sides who believe two different things. So based on what we're hearing from the police, it sounds like, previous self-harm and a text message that had been sent before and the note, all of those sound, unfortunately, like that is a situation where she potentially could have taken her own life, especially, add in an emotional, sense of heightened emotions because she had just had a huge argument with her boyfriend, and she had had an argument with somebody else earlier, and she has, been drinking. She was intoxicated. All of these things can kind of snowball into something tragic like this happening. On the other hand, some of this evidence is, of course, open for interpretation. We haven't seen what the text message said. We haven't seen what the note says. We haven't seen anything about the evidence. We're only being told what it means from two different sides, and we're being told two very different things. So based on what we've seen, I think it's not definitive, but there is a suggestion that she could have, of course, been, unfortunately suicidal.
Let me ask you this, Dr. Jamie Zuckerman, because this is something that the family attorney pointed out. If, in fact, the other young women who were at the apartment knew about this prior self-harming behavior that day and perhaps knew that there was something going on here, she has this huge fight and then goes out onto the balcony. And then they basically, I don't know what they did, but no one's reacting to that in that moment, right? Self-harming that day, big blowout argument, screaming, gives the phone back, goes out to the balcony, and everyone seemingly does not react to that. Does that make sense to you?
It does, unfortunately. I would imagine that college-age students, when you hear about self-harm, are not immediately linking that to suicide. We don't know how many of the people knew about the self-harm. We don't know the context that the self-harm was in. We don't know the severity of it. We don't know if it was superficial. We don't know, again, how many people were aware of this. And also, we're going to assume that the people in the apartment were intoxicated as well, maybe not, paying attention or even thinking clearly.
All right, Dr. Jamie Zuckerman, great to have you and your expertise. Brandy Churchwell, great to see you as well. Thank you both so much. Coming up next, big question. Should the investigation continue?
The Austin Police Department formed a conclusion within hours of this tragedy that this was a suicide without any investigation.
The disappearance of mother Anna Walsh.
Her husband now charged with her murder.
All eyes on this accused killer.
Mr. Walsh was suspecting his wife of having an affair.
It's a massive trail of evidence.
This incredible timeline of Google searches.
It shows everything that was in his mind.
He searched how long before a body starts to smell.
The disappearance of Anna Walsh murder trial. Live coverage weekday mornings, 8, 7 Central on Court TV.
It is not common for a police department to speak publicly about a death by suicide. But inaccurate information has circulated and been reported. And that has led to additional harm of innocent people, bullying included, and their families. There have also been statements suggesting the police have failed to do our jobs. Those statements are not accurate.
Austin PD says they are doing everything 100% correctly in this case. The victim, whether she's a victim of taking her own life or she's a victim of something else happening, the family is not satisfied, and they are the ones that are making a lot of noise and raising questions and suspicions here. Let's bring back in Court TV field reporter Cody Thomas. All right, let's talk about the apartment. What do we know about who was in the apartment that night?
Well, Vinny, along with Brianna, investigators say that there were 3 other girls in that apartment with her in those late hours in the night. Now, we don't know exactly who they are, but attorney Tony Busby claims one of them is a girl that Brianna allegedly got in a fight with earlier in the day at that tailgate at the rugby park. Now, investigators spoke with these 3 girls the following afternoon. At least one of them called 911 that afternoon, reporting Brianna missing. Now, they all 3 initially claimed they were asleep, but as the story has developed, Vinny, we now know that at least one of them was awake because Brianna borrowed that one's phone to talk with her boyfriend just minutes before her death. So, Vinny, as this story continues to unfold, we know what investigators are saying and what police are saying. We know what Tony Busby and Brianna's mother are saying, but it still seems like there's definitely some holes that need filling in here.
Yeah, and the biggest question I think Tony Busby raised was about the timing here right at the end between the phone and the original story that everyone was asleep. Cody Thomas, great work tonight. That brings us to the final question in our investigation this hour, which is, should the investigation continue at this point? Joining me, Texas criminal defense attorney, former prosecutor Lindsay Richards, and still with us, private investigator Lauren Vellucci. All right, Lindsay, what are your thoughts here? Should this investigation continue?
Well, it's kind of hard to say because I don't think we know everything that was investigated so far. I know APD has given us some information, but I don't think we know the full extent of the investigation that has taken place so far. We only know kind of the holes that Busby has placed, within the investigation and from what the family has been told. But I will say, I was speaking earlier today with my investigator that I work with now as a defense attorney that was previously a homicide detective with the Austin Police Department. And he was saying he knows that they are all trained to, investigate every death as a homicide until there's irrefutable proof otherwise, right? And so he feels very confident that it must have led to irrefutable proof that this was a suicide in this instance. But the family now is calling for the Rangers to get involved. And I kind of do feel like if there's nothing wrong with the investigation and APD does feel confident about the investigation, then let's go ahead and let the Rangers kind of check their work, right? I don't think there's any harm in that.
Yeah. Lauren, do you think part of the investigation should include, and maybe it did, I don't know, asking the other young women in that apartment to voluntarily hand over their phones?
Yeah, that should have been done right away. They should have been separated, and they should have contacted the people who left that apartment 15 minutes prior to when this phone call with her boyfriend happened. If you listen to the press conference closely, he gives you a roadmap of what they did and they didn't do. And it's very telling because at the very least, this timeline is a problem for the ladies who were in this house. They are giving conflicting stories to what the actual evidence and what we know, which isn't a whole lot because in my opinion, there wasn't a proper investigation done. We know that there was a call made and at that time, and then we know when the 911 call was placed because someone saw and heard her fall. So that limits that timeline to a very specific area. And what those ladies are saying is problematic for that. And it's a big problem. But this kind of investigation doesn't just end within a day. Whatever they did or didn't do, you can't do a proper investigation like this and talk to the people that you need to talk to in the amount of time that they took to investigate this. So there's a problem. And just like my co-panelist was saying, if there isn't an issue with your work, let someone else who has an objective, sense who isn't biased in this investigation. Because at this point they are. They've already made their findings. Let someone else come in and see and check your work.
Lindsay, we have about 30 seconds left here. What are your thoughts about the call not being made till the following afternoon at 12:14 about their friend being missing?
It's, again, I think the difficulty that I'm having and where I'm struggling is that I don't know what these witness statements, what every single one of them were, and the thoroughness of the entire investigation, because I still feel like there's a lot that we don't know. So I don't know whether or not that is enough to be suspicious completely of the entire investigation.
Lindsay Richards, Lauren Vellucci, thank you both so much. Great to have you on the show. This is a really difficult and tragic story, but I 100% agree with what Brianna's family is doing. They're making noise, shining a spotlight to do everything they can to ensure a complete investigation is done. I don't know what happened to Brianna, but I know what should happen now. An open-minded, follow the evidence look at this tragic death. I'm Vinnie Politan. We'll keep digging for answers as the investigation continues.